Let's select a few things. We're going to start with this and this. These two. We're going to go chronologically and see where that part of the world's history takes us. Of course, history is always written by the winners, and especially as a French Canadian, the history that I learn in school is often, even without people wanting it that way, it is still one-sided in great part. And what I'm trying to do is deconstruct the elements that are very one-sided and try to relearn history through the multi-faceted side. Well, this is a replica, which means I have no problem using it, loading it with black powder, even with a projectile, and target shooting with it. But it's exact copy of the original brown Bess that was made in hundreds of thousands, if not millions of copies throughout pretty much a couple of centuries. In the case of this particular firearm, the technology is very ancient, it is efficient, but it's very different from any kind of modern rifle or hunting rifle you would be using today. We use a flint that strikes the frizzen, creates a shower of sparks that ignites in the flashbang a small charge of black powder. And this small charge of black powder igniting will bring some fire through a small hole here into the chamber. And the barrel in the chamber, this is pretty much like a small cannon, because there's only the one opening at the top, the muzzle. So you would pour the powder, pour the projectile from the muzzle end, ram this with the ramrod, and then ignite the charge. And then it takes a little bit of time between the pull of the trigger and the actual shot, projectile firing off at the muzzle end. So there's a delay, and there's a smell, and there's smoke, and there's only a few shots that you can fire before you need to thoroughly clean the barrel. The more I learn about past conflicts and the fact that I do have access to these artifacts, you get a three-dimensional sensory impression of what it must have been like, not only to actually hold this and use it because of the weight, the noise, the recoil, the smoke, but you do also get an appreciation for what it must have been like to be on the other end, facing the muzzle, and how frightening that must have been. How completely alien this kind of technology should have been for people who have never seen firearms before, and how one-sided technology makes any kind of military conflicts in North America. And so technological advancement in Europe allowed the empire, the British Empire and others too, between the French and the Portuguese and the Spanish and all that stuff, between this and illnesses and viruses, and this is why the British Empire conquered North America. But holding this, using this, doing some target shooting with this is a way to connect with history, I think, like very few other means would allow.
This is what they would have used to fight against the Indigenous people.
Absolutely. And of course then, as soon as you start seeing the French lose and the British win, then the French see Indigenous as, well, there were allies on both sides, right? And then you start to see the use of firearms very early on with Indigenous allies. But for me, the brown Bess does represent how dominant the British Empire was. From there, then you start looking at all the consequences of this dominance and what part of today's world is still a direct result of this dominance that was brought by technological dominance. Once we move into the mid-1800s, very little happens once you get to the end of the 1800s. Smokeless powder is there, self-loading rifles are there, steel has come quite a long ways. So what you see in the 1900s is mostly variations on all these technologies. Hunting rifles we use today are very similar to the military rifles that were developed by the Mauser brothers in Germany in the 1870s. That's why my interest in collecting historical firearms and target shooting is mostly focused on that period of, say, 1850 to World War II, and that's Some could say it's a narrow focus, but so much happened in that period of time. So we have here, again, British Empire, Snider Enfield, which is the first breech-loading, shoulder-fired rifle that was adopted by the British military. And so you're going from a muzzle loader that you may be able to shoot 3 rounds a minute out of, give or take, to a weapon that has cartridges ready to be just shoved into the chamber. The action can be closed, then the hammer's cocked, and you fire. And right after that, you can do the same operation quickly, go into your ammo pouch, put another cartridge. So you go from maybe 3 rounds a minute to more than 15, maybe up to 20. So again, you can see why the technological advantage of all these discoveries and all these inventions is just bringing armed conflicts to a level of destruction that only people could dream about, nightmare about, a few years earlier. Then we go to, again, all this, between this and this, there's about 50 years, 60 years worth of technological advancement. And then from this to this, you have about 25, 30 maybe. We get to the very late 1890s, and we have the Lee Enfield No. 1 Mark III, a bolt-action, magazine-fed, smokeless powder cartridge, so you can shoot many rounds before you even need to worry about any kind of cleaning. And this is what the British used throughout World War I. And then we have a Ross rifle. There's a lot of interesting stories about Ross rifle. Sir Charles Ross convinced the government of Canada that he could make the best rifle. And World War I came up, and Canada had to quickly bring the Ross rifle to the front. It was not quite ready, and it brought all sorts of problems, and thousands of Canadian soldiers lost their life because their rifle wasn't quite ready, would jam, wouldn't deal well with the mud, and so eventually the Canadian government reverted back to the British rifle, the Lee Enfield No. 1 Mark III. But this is, again, an interesting piece of not only Canadian military history, but political history. How come Canada wanted so much to have their own home production, their home design, to kind of break away from the British influence and show that Canada could be an autonomous country and no longer be a colony, right? We're talking not too long after Confederation here. So this pride, this willingness to go from a teenage to adulthood in terms of Canada as a country. And this rifle kind of represents that too.
What do you think about the some of the prejudices that you generally hear about Native people? Oh, we're alcoholics and so forth.
Okay, well,
we're on welfare.
there's answers for everything. I mean, why are we alcoholics?
Yeah.
It's true. I mean, when you look at First Nations and the statistics, we have the highest rates of alcoholism, we have the highest rates of suicide, we have the highest rates of drug abuse, and we have the highest rates of unemployment. But we're not getting the jobs, we're not getting riding the gravy train from the federal government. They say that we have, jurisdiction over all of this crown land, and that we should enjoy it. And then you look at big companies like Irving, these are the real guys that are really enjoying the crown land and taking advantage of it. And we don't have the resources to actually get ourselves involved in in extracting the resources out of our land. Mm-hmm. And when you go, let's talk about fishing now. We go upriver. There's $1 million pool. There's the American camp. There's the Irving camp. There's all these rich people that come and fish. And then the government on one side of the mouth says, okay, we recognize the Supreme Court decision. Natives have the right to hunt and fish anywhere you want. Try going upriver and fishing the $1 million pool. You can't. you get harassed, and then when they harass you, you try to press charges on them and nothing happens. You know, these people are untouchable. It's money. So, you know, we want to have a piece of the pie. We do have a piece of the pie, but what we're getting is spoiled. We're not, it's like Elijah Harper said, we're administering our own misery with self-government. You know, the natives cried for self-government and we got it. And the federal government gave up fiduciary responsibility. And now they don't want to live up to anything. They want to just hand us money, spoil us, give people houses that, you know, like they have housing programs. I've seen a girl dropped out of high school, pregnant, get a house. I mean, what kind of, you know, what does that say for, like, you know, here you go, like drop out of high school, get pregnant, and you'll get a house. You know, that's not a good message for other young people. We should be encouraging work. Like years ago in the 60s and 70s, my father, your father, his parents, we would go to the States and work, ironwork and construction, you know, and like the young men would have to leave because we had nothing here. In those times, I mean, we had nothing more than a welfare check. You couldn't get a job. You couldn't find work. You had to go to the land of the opportunity, the land of the free and the home of the brave to get a job. But people worked. There was a work ethic. You know, you really earned your day's wages. Now, I mean, a few years back, a friend of mine and I, we were sitting at break time talking about our friends. None of them want to come down to the States. None of them want to work. They get out of high school, they get a welfare check, and they live the easy life, maybe a free house, you know, that they pay $300 a month on, and get some welfare, and then they don't have to work. It's like we're feeding our own laziness. We're producing lazy people, and so when people do say natives are lazy, in a way, it's true, but it's not because a biological. I mean, it's how the society is affecting us. There are some lazy natives. It's true. There's lazy white people. There's lazy Chinamen. There's lazy anyone. Lazy Frenchmen. You know, it's across the board. But our system here, we're kind of we're supporting it, or we're nurturing a lazy environment. That's how I feel about when, you know, I work. You know, I've been on unemployment, but every time I've been on unemployment, I've either been taking training or, you know, just like in between jobs. I've never really been on an extended period, like, you know, I get my 14 weeks and then just stop working and, you know, and live off of unemployment. I mean, that's the system that a lot of people get caught up in. And then, okay, now you're on unemployment, you're not working. What are you going to do? You're going to become an alcoholic. You're going to get drunk. You know, it's, we need something here, like in industry to get, like, there are workers here, but we're not nurturing, we're not making an environment that nurtures workers. We're subsiding on 14 weeks a year, and then the unemployment that the masses of the working people pay. And look at us with look at people that are on unemployment with disdain, and, you know, and they're discouraged. Oh, these people are, you know, seasonal workers. They don't make. I work, you know, 5 years and I pay my unemployment. I never collect it. You know, I'm a worker. Well, try doing seasonal work. Try, you know.
If the Listigouche government or the future leadership actually went to the government and said, the solutions to our problems are financial. We need another, let's say, $10 million to help our people. You know, would you trust your government with that money?
Ooh, it's hard. The government that's in now?
Any government, and the future government. Do you need government now then?
The problem with our government now is that we're in a system where, like at election time, like it is now, they want to give away stuff to get votes, to stay in, to keep their $900 job. They want to keep people voting for them. But they can't do that without giving stuff away. My fiance is a counselor. She's in charge of housing. She works. She makes $900 a week. But for example, they got a stimulus package that came in. They got approved. Now the counselors are licking their lips and they want to give it away so bad. And my woman is saying, no, we're not going to give it away until after the election. Why would we give it away now? Because, people are going to end up, people that don't really need the stimulus, they want a dream kitchen or, a new whatever, they're gonna get it. And the people that really need it, that have leaking basements and, that people that are living in mold, that this is what the stimulus package is for, to help these people and not, give away campaign promises. And you have the biggest family, I'm going to give you a new kitchen, vote for me, and get your family to vote for me. I wouldn't, for that $10 million, I wouldn't trust the government with it now. Well, if it's my woman, I guess I would have to. She's pretty straight and honest, and, you could talk to her. You should talk to her. She'll talk to you. She'll tell you anything. You ask her, she can tell you straight out. No, she might be a little camera shy, but...
Are we ready for self-government?
No, I don't think so. I don't think we are ready for self-government. In order, I heard a famous quote, and right now there's too much division in our community. When you look back to I think in '99, the community was so divided that the election came down to one vote. It was a one vote difference between chiefs. That's how divided the community was. And right now we're not together. In order to have a society, the society needs an enemy image, or a binding force that they can all work against. Because hate is pretty strong, but it's a good motivator. And people need to believe in a cause. And right now we don't have any causes. All we have is a little piece of pie coming in from the government that the band office divides up, and whether it be political or they really need it. It's just people are not. I'm lost for words.
In Ottawa, the Assembly First Nations and all those guys their rallying cry. We need self-government. We need to handle our own resources, the monies that come in.
Well, that's when it comes to Elijah Harper. I'll never forget that self-government is we're administering our own misery, and those words make a lot of sense. It's we're not ready for it yet. We're not ready to. The rallying cry in Ottawa might be that, and I don't want to go back to the days where we have an Indian agent, and then he gives away all the stuff, because it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be the Indian agent, giving contracts to his friend, and when work comes up, maybe we need an Indian agent to be the enemy image that will bring our society together. Okay, well, when they say how many billions that they're spending on our communities, how many trillions are coming out of the natural resources that we have, that we're supposed to enjoy? Ask them that. They say that we've made treaties that say we have control over this land, that it's Mi'kmaq territory, from Nova Scotia to New Brunswick to the Gaspé Peninsula. It's Wabanaki, and we don't have any major forestry. Our fisheries, we were just given a fisheries 10 years ago. Before that, there was never any natives with licenses. And when you look at tobacco was invented by natives. How many natives have a license to sell tobacco on a scale that's matches de Maurier or any Imperial Tobacco or all of these big companies? We don't get the money that they have works against us, and we're not getting anywhere near the money that they're making off of our resources, off of our natural resources. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, anybody in Ottawa that wants to talk about Indians getting too much money, as a matter of fact, our education, our kid that goes to school here is worth $5,000 a head. For some reason, the kid from the same town that goes to school in Campbellton is worth $9,450. That's how much the school gets per head. So, like, why would they spend almost half as much on a kid on the reserve and spend twice as much on a kid in town when we both come from the same area? And
why do you think that is?
Maybe they don't want us to get educated so that we can't go to university. Maybe it's because we don't pay taxes and they just can't. Maybe they want to keep us down. They're afraid of intelligent natives. Who knows what the motives are? But it's you'd have to ask the Minister of Education why, or the Department of Indian Affairs, why they only give $5,000 a head for a student in Restigouche, and then the same student goes to Campbellton and they give the school almost $10,000, just short of $10,000. Why? I mean, there's who knows why? What are they afraid? Are they afraid of us becoming intelligent and taking over? Learning about the laws that our forefathers made, and starting to assert them. Are they afraid that we're going to assert our laws? Because I went upriver a couple of years ago and I started asserting my right to fish, and I was harassed by DFO, RCMP, and fishing guides that have no right to harass me.
First thing that came to mind is how quickly the traditional cultures were thrown down the gutter, right? And that reminded me of a conversation I had probably 20 years ago when I was working at the Canadian Museum of Nature, and I had the privilege to spend a summer with a Inuit from Igloolik, Theo Ikumak. And I do believe Theo was born in an igloo. And fast forward to now, he lives in a village where houses were built by the government, and he skidoos to go harvest some seal. How different those two worlds are, and how fast the government forced this indigenous population from the north to go from one way of living to something completely different. So we often hear part of the reconciliation narrative, right? It took 7 generations to bring us to this mess. It's going to take 7 generations to fix it. I hope there's a way to fix it. I don't know how romanticized this is, but I understand the principle of this. This is a mess. It's a messy situation. It is a complicated situation. Solutions are not simple, and scars are deep. And I almost was hopeful with the current Liberal government that concrete decisions would be made to bring in legislation that would start at least to move towards resolution of core issues that bring all the problems that we have. But is this just noise? I think the jury is still out. At least there's a definite increase in how conscious Canadians are of the reality to a certain degree of Indigenous population. But I mean, how many Canadians read the Indian Act, for example, or have looked at how the government has, over the years and years and years since Confederation, treated the Indian problem. How many Canadians truly understand exactly the fine details of how money is given to, say, Indigenous communities, how it's managed, but also what comes with that money? What are the restrictions? What can you do? What can't you do? What do you have access to? What don't you have access to? And all of these things. And I have to say, I'm asking the questions and I can't even answer them. But I hope at least that there's this little first step where more people in Canada are a little bit more aware of how much it sucks. Pardon my French. Hopefully this is a push in the right direction that will get more and more people interested in looking deeper into this. If I compare myself to my two sons, they're two great boys, they're in their 20s, and definitely when we talk about this, their intention is their level of awareness is miles ahead of mine when I was in my 20s. So there's that. So there's a little bit of hope there, which ultimately may lead to different, not only voting intentions to put governments that are more towards the solutions, but also bring in politicians that do intend to actually change, not just get elected, but change the system at the core from the federal level and then the provincial and then the territorial and so forth. But it has to start with raising different politicians and voters. So making sure that this growing generation sees this reality completely differently. And again, my sample is small if I look at my two sons, but I think they are way ahead of me. So hopefully that's a sign that maybe others are going in that direction. Then again, it's hard not to be jaded. I mean, Reboul, who was elected, who was Chief Justice, who was the Indian in the cabinet. Great book. Everybody read that book, Indian in the Cabinet. Here's an Indigenous woman that jumped through all the hoops. Could have been instrumental in helping Canada move in that direction. Well, she was seen as a threat by a certain prime minister, and she got thrown in the mud. That was, I think, a tremendously immense mistake for Canada, and we let it happen. But hopefully there will be more. There will be others who will step up, and there will be more receptive white men in the cabinet able to see why this is absolutely needed, right? Why this is critical to moving forward and fixing what's broken. And everybody wins ultimately, right? Yes, I was surprised a bit. But quickly then that forces me to pay attention to their own analysis of the reasons why these realities are where they are. And also, how come most Canadians are not outraged by the fact that those situations are caused by the system that Canada has, right? The gentleman was talking about the suicide rate, for example, and there's a few Indigenous communities where suicide rates are way, way above any kind of I wouldn't say acceptable level, but way above anything else in the country. If that same crisis was happening, say, here in Elmer, I mean, the resources would be pouring in to resolve the situation. So there's that element that really makes me uncomfortable, because then, okay, we all agree that these problems are there, and yet it doesn't appear to be that bad if it's an Indian committing suicide, or an Indian not having access to water, or an Indian being depressed and alcoholic. How come this isn't as bad I'm angered by this element. So, but what will it take for this to actually be shaken and then reconstructed? But I do believe, like, listening to ideas coming from within. Are we listening? Is the government listening to ideas coming from within, say, an Indigenous community? Are these voices being heard? Are these proposals being analyzed and tested and received at face value? I don't know. He did mention, talking to one another and getting people more educated. People, and I think I did mention that earlier. I look back at the school curriculum that I grew up in. How much time was spent learning about how society works everywhere, including Indigenous communities? Probably nothing, right? We all learn about Southern Quebec government, le régime français, how the French came here, now the English won, and how come they're still French in Quebec. This is kind of the history curriculum that I remember anyways. But that is such a narrow-minded view of everything, and that prevents me as a child and teenager to even consider the possibility of the existence of something outside of these tight confines. So relearning and talking to one another definitely has to be part of the solution, and maybe that is worth finding formal ways to make that happen. Will I take refuge in, I'm too old for this, I'm going to leave that for the next generation? Or will I keep on moving in a direction that at least a part of me has started moving towards, which is being open to listening and being open to modifying knowledge that I have that I was secured with. I want to think, I want to hope that this is kind of what my next 10 or 20 years will be like, where I will choose to visit Indigenous communities, connect with Indigenous colleagues and friends more and more, talk openly about this with friends, challenge those who want to perpetuate those misconceptions, voice to my elected officials that I disagree with, say, this or that, in that respect. I wonder if a society or a country can evolve in the same way as somebody struggling with serious issues. And you often hear that, well, people who recover from serious issues, I had to hit rock bottom before actually coming back up. And I'm thinking, if finding mass graves of Indigenous kids that were stolen from their family isn't rock bottom, what is? I mean, I can't think of anything that could be worse than this in terms of a slap in the face and a wake-up call, right? Anybody doubting that it's been really, really bad here? Anyone? I hope not. Unless, and this is where we can bring the social media effect of shielding people from this and having more people just choose not to believe that this actually exists and is real. So maybe this is where the fight is. I mean, how easy is it for somebody who sees that discomfort to simply dismiss it and maintain a certain level of comfort in willing ignorance? But I mean, I'm a a hopeless optimistic person. I hang on to hope always that there is a way, there will be a way, and that it will move towards that. I do believe more people now truly understand how terrible the plight of Indigenous populations in Canada has been than, say, 10 years ago or 20 years ago. How will that evolve in the future? I don't know. But again, I have to trust that this is one piece of the puzzle that's been placed on the table, where there's more awareness. Now, will we choose collectively to build on this awareness and go to further steps, right, where there are better decisions being made, better willingness to seek more information, greater understanding of the complexity, admitting that it is complex and it's not going to be simple, accepting that resources are needed, but managed differently or allocated differently. I don't know, but I am worried that it is easier now to shield yourself from reality. I do believe that's true. And that may be a big threat to fixing what requires fixing. There are some changes in societies over history that have started at the ground level, where it wasn't people just waiting for the government to change something or waited for, stars, the popular people to fix it and initiate a movement and so forth. Maybe it needs to start at the ground level, where ultimately it is for you and I to just begin change at our level. And one by one, we change one another, we adjust, or we get to know one another and we understand one another. And then bit by bit, this will translate into, different governments at all levels, right? Or self-governing challenges. Well, it's the same at all different levels of government. People are elected by voters who decide to vote based on what information they have. Well, if you and I talk and we get to know one another and we then start talking the same language a little bit more, then already our decision making will be different, and so our voting will be different, and the pressures we'll put on our elected people will be different. I mean, this may be a wild shot, but the top-down solutions haven't really brought anything in the past forever. So maybe the work that you are doing, bringing this information and these conversations to everybody who cares to listen, that's kind of part of what can work. What part media will play? Media choosing to bring the residential school situation to the vast majority of the population that thankfully had no choice but to hear about it at some point, somehow. Bringing the raw information to people, hoping they can at least, if not listen, at the very least hear it, maybe understand it later, right? Receive the information. Making sure the next generation learns differently in school. I'm an educator first and foremost. This is what I believe my true core identity is. I teach, I share knowledge, I tell stories. I share stories. Well, as an educator, I do believe that I didn't learn the right things in school with respect to history. So maybe that's another place where it could be a critical piece of the puzzle. How do we make sure that all governments across Canada bring this complex and at times very ugly reality to the next generations? Because Instagram's not going to do it. So we have to make sure that the next generation have a better basic understanding of what has happened and what is still happening. Yeah, those two things. So let's share a meal, let's talk to one another, and let's make sure kids in school learn better, more complete information, more complete picture.